An upcoming U.S. Supreme Court decision could have a huge impact on the cost of health care for millions of people across the country, including Florida. Joining us now to go in depth is Seema Mohapatra, an associate professor of law at the Burwell University School of Law here in Orlando. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's see. Let me ask you first of all, this case pertains to part of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. So really, what's the issue?
Well, the issue is whether the 34 states that didn't set up their own state exchanges to buy health care, whether people that signed up through healthcare.gov could still get subsidies for their health care.
So if the court rules in favor of the plaintiffs, what could happen, especially in Florida?
Well, Florida would be the most affected because we have the most people, 1.4 million people that actually signed up for healthcare.gov, and out of that, 94% of the people, 1.3 million, are getting subsidies. So those people could actually lose their healthcare coverage because they could no longer afford it.
We're talking about 1.4 million people?
1.3 million in Florida,
Whoa.
potentially. And what's ironic is that one of the plaintiffs in the King versus Burwell case actually has coverage through, because he's a Vietnam veteran, through the VA. And so the people that actually don't have coverage are going to be affected in this case.
What happens to them?
Well, we don't know. In states like Florida, where we have, politically, we didn't expand Medicaid, and it looks like politically there's not going to be really a push to set up a state exchange. We don't really know what's going to happen. It's a real problem.
Well, I would imagine. I mean, where are those people going to go, and what are they going to do?
Well, and how are they going to afford health care? 3 states out of the 34 have already started setting up their own state exchanges, and depending on how the Supreme Court rules, there is enough time before next year to set up a state exchange, but politically the will has to be there, which it's not. And this is also not really an issue of Republicans versus Democrats, because big business has a big stake in the fact that Affordable Care Act should run the way it's supposed to, and HCA, one of the largest healthcare companies, has actually set a brief in favor of the government's position, and so this is really a very important issue.
Well, let me ask you this: how fast could we see those effects if the court does in fact get rid of the subsidies?
It depends on what the court says. If the court says, immediately this Treasury Department regulation should become ineffective, then as soon